All right, welcome to the Week 3 Forum. This week we are looking at again this idea of objectivity and how values interact with our attempts to be objective in our study of social phenomena. And so we have this dichotomy here between appearance and reality. And there is a question as to how effective we can be as researchers in piercing the appearance, piercing the veil, and coming to an objective appraisal. And this is, to me, I think you can, look at social phenomenon and say, we can't absolutely know what's going on, but we can be realistic in terms of how we're describing it and how we're evaluating it. And so, um, we have to find these controlling mechanisms when we're investigating things. I like to, when I look at, for example, grading and stuff, a lot of kids I've been asked in the past, how do you grade objectively? And the main thing to do is to not look at what you're grading. It used to be easy. You just put, a piece of cloth or whatever over the name of, that's on the paper. Today, you kind of have to just close your eyes when you click on papers and things like that, and and make sure that you don't know who it is. That way, you're kind of controlling, so that if you do feel, I like this kid or this kid rubbed me the wrong way or whatever, that you're not allowing your personal viewpoints to intrude into what you're evaluating. I think again, when you look at the idea of how we control as researchers, you have to be able to first recognize and try to avoid the idea that you are looking for a particular outcome. And that's something that I think that they address in this chapter. Likewise, they talk a lot about the idea of the worries of going native, right? These are things that we have to be aware of. A good deal of this chapter is taken up with the contrast between Thomas Kuhn and Emir Lakatos in terms of their views of what constitutes scientific knowledge. And I think the main thing to recognize with Thomas Kuhn, who's a giant in the philosophy of science, in that within that subdiscipline, um, and that is the idea that he recognizes something important, and that is that science is a social activity, and that means that we have a tendency to come to certain kinds of consensus on what is truth and what is the current state of our discipline, what constitutes knowledge, what is part of the canon, if you will, and what is not. And so, to me, this idea of normal science is really important, and that, for, when we reach this idea that everyone's on the same page, we're all just engaging in this puzzle solving activity, slowly building up the body of knowledge into a great edifice of knowledge. And then along come these anomalies. And what does this suggest? It's, to me, I think, I think science is sort of a democratic activity. And that is, it exists. We all agree. The community of scholars is, all agree on certain things. But then there's these other things out there that we don't understand and we can't figure out within the paradigm of knowledge that we have how to incorporate that, right? And so, in the field of economics for much of the 20th century, Keynesianism really dominated the field of economics. Well, in the 1970s, Milton Friedman began kind of poking holes in that. And there were things that were happening economically that really could not be explained well within Keynesianism. There was this, the fact that we had stagflation. Keynesians didn't really understand why that was happening. And so you had a movement within the economics field towards more of a monetarist view. Um, but increasingly that perspective got blown up. And today I think Keynesianism or new Keynesianism is kind of making a return. And so, the field of economics, like the field of political science, is increasingly kind of fractured, and there is no one dominant body of knowledge. There are a lot of people out there who fundamentally, have issues with behavioralism and what that implies in terms of how you can form knowledge. So back to Kuhn. Um, Kuhn is basically saying, that because science is a social activity, very frequently you have well, not frequently, but you have these moments where anomalies build up, and then a rival, field comes along, and or a rival paradigm comes along, and he's really kind of equating science with politics and suggesting that there are revolutions in science, which kind of means that you go from one regime to another, and it's an entirely different body of knowledge. And the question is, does that scientific revolution lead to some, in a Hegelian way, to some more synthetic understanding of social phenomena? Uh, Lakatos, I think, is trying to come up with a less kind of disruptive understanding of how knowledge builds within the social sciences. Uh, I'm not entirely persuaded that Lakatos's approach is necessarily more accurate in terms of modeling what happens within a lot of scientific fields. And of course, Kuhn is really talking about the natural sciences. He's equally convinced that the natural sciences that everybody thinks is this purely rational enterprise, that it's happening in every bit as much of a social and if you will, political way. And so, again, what it gets down to is that, you know, social science, science generally, is a human activity. And that means it's socially constructed. And so we should always be aware of that when we're studying how we know what we know. And that's really what this kind of a course is like. So I really think we should always uh, have a certain amount of humility when we approach these kinds of questions, and we should recognize that there may be better ways of learning things. So as you read through this material, hopefully you can point out or you can identify things that you're having difficulty understanding, and you can bring them into the forum, and hopefully I or one of your classmates can kind of clear things up. So let's have a great week of discussion. Let's learn a lot, and there's a lot to discuss.